Friends, we begin the study of Book 5. Now, I had previously, I believe in error, referred to Book 5 as the second longest. The second longest book of the Persian Bayán is actually Book 6, which we will be covering in the next webinar, our fifth. Here in our fourth, we're going to be covering the entire Book 5 in two parts, as was mentioned in the previous session. So, as far as the external features of Book 5, with 33 handwritten pages, in the TAM edition, it's from page 151 to 184. So in the original language, it is the fourth shortest book, rather, or fourth shortest Váḥid of the Bayán Farsi. In Nicolas' French translation of Book 5, it is about 56 pages in length in Le Bayán Persan, Volume 3, from page 1 to page 57. Only 6 excerpts from this Váḥid have been translated into English by the Baha'i World Center, and they are namely from chapters 4, 5, 8, 12, 14, and 19. This chapter gets into a lot of really fascinating subjects, which I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions, and hopefully we can address them at the end of these two parts today. In chapter 1, and as well as chapter 18, with only 10 handwritten lines in the original language, they are the shortest chapters of Book 5. Chapter 1 is entitled On the Exposition of the Holy Mosque. So there's a bit of a spillover, if you will, or continuation from the last couple of chapters of the Book 4, where the Bab was talking about the house of God. Here he talks about the mosque, or the holy mosque. It begins with these words. The Bab states the substance of this gate or chapter is that the first land which shall witness the corporeal appearance of him whom God shall make manifest hath been and will ever be the most sacred temple, Masjid al-Haram, or Haram rather. So it's Masjid al-Haram is the most sacred temple, the place that him whom God shall make manifest is born. Now, for some of you, this will bring your minds to the statement in the Kitab Aqdas. This reference to the sanctity of the birthplace of him whom God shall make manifest, that is Bahá'u'lláh, has been reaffirmed by God in the Kitab Aqdas. In the Kitab Aqdas, we read, this is in paragraphs 91 to 92, let not grieve thee, لا تحزني من شيء قد جعلك الله مطلع فرح العالمين. You know, some of you know that by heart in Arabic. Let not grieve thee, O land of Ta, for God hath chosen thee to be the source of the joy of all mankind. Rejoice with great joy, for God hath made thee the dayspring of his light, inasmuch as within thee was born the manifestation of his glory. Be thou glad for this name that hath been conferred upon thee, a name through which the day star of grace hath shed its splendor, through which both earth and heaven hath been illumined. And I want to also add, I believe, and I have to go back in my memory, but I believe in one of the talks of Abdul Baha, there was a question asked, and I believe this is published in Khatabat, but again, please don't quote me on that. In any event, a question was posed to the beloved master about the land of the birth of Baha'u'lláh, which is Tehran. And Abdul Baha says, again, and I'm paraphrasing, I recall this, reading this many, many years ago, that in the same way that it took centuries for Mecca to become the center of the Muslim world as Islam expanded and became more of a global faith as opposed to a regional faith, so does in future Tehran will be, where it will become the place, the center, the heart of the planet. And so this is a prophecy. This is something that we can all look forward to. Right now, Tehran does not seem to be a very attractive place in this time in history, but in future, it shall be. Without a shadow of a doubt, God has said it, it will be so. So, so this is essentially the theme of the first chapter. A few lines later in the same chapter 1, the Bab continues, the purpose of this ordinance is this, that when a piece of earth is ennobled by virtue of its association with his body, it attaineth such an exalted station that it becomes the place of pilgrimage through the act of circumambulation around his house. Then how much more exalted would be the soil of the essential bodies that point unto his magnificence, and the soil of the souls that refer unto his unity, and the soil of the spirits that hint at his praise, and the soil of the hearts that mirror his glorification. For in the foremost station of the heart, the fire of love shineth forth, and in the second, the air of guardianship ascendeth, and in the third, the water of unity surgeth, and in the fourth, the dust of existence is elevated. The four elements the Bab is making mention of. And Dr. Saidi, this is his translation, and does explain this wonderfully in his book. So this excerpt is from page 294 of The Gate of the Heart. In chapter 2, the theme is somewhat similar. It's a continuation of chapter 1. In the first few lines of this chapter, the Bab states that it would be worthy of those believers in the Bayán who have the financial means to build 18 new and separate holy mosques in the name of the letters of the living of him whom God shall make manifest. The letters of the living of him whom God shall make manifest, his apostles, in the name of them. Unfortunately, no part of chapter 2 has been translated by the Baha'i World Center, nor any parts of it has been discussed or quoted by Dr. Saidi in his book. It consists of 26 handwritten lines in the original language, this chapter 2. Moving on to chapter 3 of book 5 is the section where the Bab introduces the new calendar. The Badi calendar that is now referred to is actually introduced in chapter 3. This chapter is entitled On the Comprehension of the Years and Months. It consists of 33 handwritten lines in the original language. Chapter 3 begins with these words. The Bab writes, the substance of this gate or chapter is that the Lord of the universe hath fashioned all types of years by his behest, and hath ordained that from the inception of the Bayán, each year should equal the numerical value of the words all things, kulla shay, which is 19 times 19 gives you 361. And this is going to be 361 days, to consist of 19 months, where each month equals 19 days. That from the moment of the rising of the sun in the vernal equinox, corresponding to the first sign of the zodiac, the sign of Aries, till the end of its voyage at the end of winter, corresponding to the last sign of the zodiac, the sign of Pisces, all beings may traverse through all the 19 stages of the letters of unity. Very fascinating chapter, and how the Bab explains the calendar. Now, the calendar is not all exclusively explained in the Persian Bayán. There's also it's been elaborated also in one of his other books as well. But again, the establishment of it is first here in the Bayán. The Bab continues. He hath named the first month splendor, Baha, and the last loftiness, Allah. He hath destined each day to be the springtime of one of his laws, that the inmates of this paradise may partake of divine delights in the utmost joy possible within the realm of creation. Therefore, during the first 3 months, the months of glorification, the fire of the hearts of existent beings is kindled. During the next 4 months, the months of the celebration of praise, the spirits of the contingent beings are created, during which time they are provided for. He continues. In the subsequent 6 months, the months of the exaltation of unity, God causeth the beings to expire, not as a physical death, but the death of negation and life in affirmation. Finally, in the last 6 months, which are the months of magnification, the Lord of the universe, glorified and exalted be he, quickeneth those souls who have died to the love of anyone other than him, and have remained steadfast in his love. The Bab goes on to say that the first 3 months of the year represents the fire of God, Narullah. The next 4 months, the air of eternity, Hawaii Azal, or Hawaii Azal. The following 6 months, the water of divine unity, Ma'e Tawheed. And the last 6 months belongs to the earth, Turab. He then states, the first month is the month of the point, and the months of the living, Shuhure Hay, revolve around it. So the first month is the month of the point, and the months of the living revolve around it. For among all the months, the month of the point is like unto a sun. Excuse me. While all other months resemble mirrors that reflect the brilliance of that exalted month. So intense is the brilliance of that month that naught could be seen in any of the other months except that month. Indeed, God has called that month the month of splendor, Shahrul Baha, meaning that therein exists the splendor of all months. He has also made it exclusive for him whom God shall make manifest, correlating each of its days to one of the letters of unity. The first day of it, which is Nowruz, is the day of there is no God but God. That day is like the point in the Bayán where everything is created from it and returned unto it. This is my translation of that excerpt from chapter 3. So the Bab introduces the calendar, 19 months of 19 days. He specifically, stipulates that the first month is the month of Baha, and the last one is the month of Allah. Chapter 4 is entitled on the injunction of naming of names with the name of God and the names of Muhammad, Ali, or composite of them, and Fatima, Hassan, and Hussein. The chapter consists of 48 handwritten lines in the original language, and is the fourth longest chapter in Book 5. About 25% of this chapter has been translated into English by the Baha'i World Center, and Dr. Saidi has translated an additional 15% of it in his book. And I've translated, I think, another 5% in here, so you're getting about 50% of this chapter. The Bab begins this chapter with these words: the substance of this gate or chapter is that God hath granted permission to his servants to name their own selves after his attributes, such as Aziz and Jabbar. So Aziz is Almighty, Jabbar, omnipotent, and the like. However, the best of names are those that have the word God in them, like Bahá'u'lláh. So he starts with Bahá'u'lláh, or Jalalullah, or Jamalullah, or Nurullah, or Fazlullah, or Judullah, you know, and so on. So Bahá'u'lláh, glory of God, Jalalullah, Jamalullah, Nurullah, Fazlullah. And, you know, many of the early believers, you know, that are even parents of many of the Persian believers of today, or even themselves, you know, my father was Sa'adatullah, so the felicity of God. So again, these were names that were encouraged. And many of the new believers from the Zoroastrian background, from the Jewish background, chose some of these names, you know, for their children. A few lines later, the Bab writes, "For the divine cycle advances in stages, until such revelation when all things will be called by the divine names, such that no name will be assigned to anything unless it is similar to one of the names of the one true God, exalted be his glory." Like Halim. I found this one somewhat amusing, but very special in that. So the Bab says Halim, which literally means forbearing, which the Bab states, even though it is a food, because for the Persians, you would know that Halim, you know, is a type of food that is made. It's usually a winter food, I believe, and I'm not going to get into what it is. Those friends who do cook, particularly the lovely Persian ladies, they would know, and my mom would know, my aunt, my grandmother, about Halim. So it's a very popular Persian dish. It's kind of like borscht, if you will, but again, very unique. So so the Bab says that, and I found that very fascinating, that even the word Halim, that is a food, but it's actually the name of God, who's forbearing. So it is similar to the one of the names of God, exalted be his glory. So he says, so for the divine cycle advances in stages, he says, until such revelation when all things will be called by the divine names, such that no name will be assigned to anything unless it is similar to the one of the names of the one true God. And then he gives the example of Halim here. Very interesting. For in the day of the revelation of the Son of Truth, this is a reference to him whom God shall make manifest, should people attain the utmost limit of perfection, and also himself too. He's the Son of Truth as well, so it could be both. So for in the day of the revelation of the Son of Truth, should people attain the utmost limit of perfection, they would not refer to anything except by a name that is similar to the one of the names of God, exalted be his glory. If, however, such a level of perfection is not achieved, it will be realized in the next revelation. Little by little, it will become a reality until all the heavens and the earth and whatsoever lies between them will be filled with the names of God. Then the section that has been translated by the Baha'i World Center, and I just added to the beginning of that, Well is it with the people of that age who would not call anything by any name except by a name of God. That age is indeed worthy of being remembered as the beginning of the worlds of paradise. No created thing, however, shall ever attain its paradise unless it appears in its highest prescribed degree of perfection. For instance, the Báb uses again an analogy of an inanimate object. He says, this crystal representeth the paradise of the stone whereof its substance is composed. Likewise, there are various stages in the paradise for the crystal itself. So long as it was stone, it was worthless. But if it attaineth the excellence of ruby, a potentiality which is latent in it, how much a carat will it be worth? So it becomes a lot. Consider likewise every created thing. What a beautiful analogy. He says that the potentiality is within you. You know, it reminds me of that passage from the writings of Bahá'u'lláh, and it's in the Gleanings, where he says, all that which ye potentially possess can only be manifested as a result of your own volition. So what we potentially have within us, Baha'u'lláh states, that can only become a reality only through our conscious choice. Whatever choice through our free will we make, that can either elevate us or bring us down. And here the Báb is using that beautiful analogy to get across the same thought. Then he continues, man's highest station, however, is attained through faith in God in every dispensation, and by acceptance of what hath been revealed by him, and not through learning, inasmuch as in every nation there are learned men who are versed in diverse sciences. Nor is it attainable through wealth, for it is similarly evident that among the various classes in every nation there are those possessed of riches. Likewise are other transitory things. True knowledge, therefore, is the knowledge of God, and this is none other than the recognition of his manifestation in each dispensation. Nor is there any wealth save in poverty in all save God, and sanctity from aught else but him, a state that can be realized only when demonstrated towards him who is the dayspring of his revelation. This, the Báb continues, doth not mean, however, that one ought not to yield praise unto former revelations. On no account is this acceptable, inasmuch as it behooveth man, upon reaching the age of 19, to render thanksgiving for the day of his conception as an embryo. Very fascinating. For had the embryo not existed, how could he have reached his present state? Likewise, had the religion taught by Adam not existed, this faith would not have attained its present stage. Thus, consider thou the development of God's faith until the end that hath no end. Again, there's a reference to Mr. Adam, or His Holiness Adam, the prophet, that has been the subject of some questions in the forum regarding when and how long ago it was his revelation. Again, the Báb makes a specific declaration. You know, again, I have no idea whether it's lunar or solar, but only he knows. It's inscrutable to all but him. So this notion of the embryo, I want you to remember it. Towards the end of this chapter, there's another law that is associated with this the semen and the seed, where the Báb talks about, very, very fascinating. So moving on to chapter 5, it is entitled On the Exposition of the Injunction of Expropriating the Possessions of Those Who Do Not Believe in the Bayán, and the command to restore those possessions back to them if they enter the faith, except in those countries wherein the seizure of possessions are impossible. This is a very fascinating, obviously, injunction by the Báb that obviously was meant to be for a short time, and it was more symbolic because in Revelation of the Blessed Beauty, this categorically is against the desire of God to intrude, infringe on the rights of other individuals through their personal possessions. Even so, but you have to understand that this was an injunction in Shia Islam. In fact, many of the friends in Iran who their properties after the Iranian Revolution of 1979 was confiscated, expropriated, including my parents, was based on this law that the infidel, those who are unbelievers, their properties can be expropriated by the state and by the religious order, which again, it's something that is artificial and was created over centuries as part of the Sharia law of Shia Islam, particularly. But so here the Báb gives a kind of a transitional, uses that established ordinance in Shia Islam, but puts it obviously from a perspective of the Bayán. This is actually a very, very brilliant and clever way, is that, and as I said, like jihad, is that by reinstating it, you're reconfirming the validity of the previous revelation, but then you start modifying it, or the God modifies it, and then eventually abrogates it, So it's a brilliant way to kind of wean off people, rather than just come in and sort of cold turkey, if you will, say there's not going to be any jihad. That would have been just so shocking to the system of most Muslims, and it would be a tremendous cause of test for them. So obviously, through His grace, God has chosen various stages to abrogate a certain law that He felt in the new revelation had no place. So this is, I find this particular chapter is again one of those transitional laws that you're going to see as part of this transformation. Now, it's very interesting that there has never been, in the past, when someone was an infidel, you expropriated their possessions in Islam, but you never restored it back. And again, I could be wrong, but I doubt that, in fact, in the Sharia law, it actually taught that even, let's say, years later, they decided to come back or become a believer. Do you restore their possession? But here the Báb very explicitly states that you take their possession, but then you restore it. So there's an order to it, and it would be an authority that would take it, not like a band of ruffians and hooligans prompted by the fatwa of an inimical enemy like the son of the wolf, that basically, willy-nilly issues a fatwa and says, go destroy any Bábí books that you see, or anything that belongs to Baha'is is yours, take it. So it just creates this chaos and this unjust and very iniquitous punishment to people who, for all intents and purposes, are innocent. So here, we need to reflect on that how this law is being transitioned from one revelation to another. Now, this chapter consists of about 35 handwritten lines in the original language. About 25% of this chapter has been translated into English by the Baha'i World Center, not obviously the section on expropriation. That's the one that I translated, the opening of this chapter, so you'll see essentially how the Bab begins this chapter with this injunction. The chapter begins with these words, so that was the title of it. The substance of this gate or chapter is that in every revelation, whatsoever is on the earth has to be under the shadow of the next revelation. For instance, in the revelation of the messenger of God, Muhammad, the blessings of God rest upon him, it would have been praiseworthy if all who dwelled on earth had become believers under his shadow. The non-occurrence of this ideal has been due to the weakness of resolve among the Muslims. For the potential to convert everyone to Islam was latent within that revelation. Very fascinating. This is my translation of the opening paragraph of this chapter. So the potential to bring every member of the human race under that religion is there, but it is really up to the followers of that faith to bring that to fruition. And just before this webinar, I was sharing this thought with Dr. Stockman about the fact that Bahá'u'lláh, in the Tablet of Medicine, which we don't have the full authorized translation of it, but we do have excerpts of it in translation, and this tablet is the tablet where at the end of it, Baha'u'lláh reveals that very famous prayer, "Thy name is my healing, oh my God," that we all know by heart. Our kids know it by heart. And immediately after that, there is a challenge that I found very poignant and still sticks with me. After many years, I read it in my youth, and it really impacted me, where Baha'u'lláh says, and I'm paraphrasing here, Baha'u'lláh says, and I'll read you the original. The original is in Persian. It reads, "Agar ahibba amil budand be anche ma'murand, hal aksar man alal arz be ridای iman muzayyan budand." So essentially what Baha'u'lláh says, that if the believers were responsible in their duty to teach the cause, then by now the majority of the world would have embraced the cause. And this is in the 1860s. And it's with such a small band of followers, Baha'u'lláh still challenges his followers, the believers, that it is really up to them to teach the cause. And you see that in all the great plans of the Guardian, Abdul Baha, the Guardian, and now the Universal House of Justice, as part of building communities, is to bring into fold the people who are truly in need of the revelation, who are thirsty for it, and yet we are the trustees, that this responsibility is placed squarely on our shoulders. So it's a challenge for every believer, obviously myself, and I look at it purely on my own, that what an awesome responsibility that, as we only constitute 1/10 of 1% of the world population. There's 7 billion, human beings, and there's only roughly about 7 million Baha'i. So that's 1/10 of 1%. It's a rather sad thing. Now, I don't blame, exclusively myself for that. I think there's other issues in the world, but we certainly are challenged by the author of the revelation as believers to rise and and promote his cause in such a way that more people will embrace it. So anyhow, this is so here the Bab placed the blame of the non-occurrence of this wide conversion of all the peoples of the world to Islam squarely on the shoulders of the believers, and he says it was due to the weakness, he uses that word, weakness of resolve among the Muslims. The sections of this chapter which have been translated into English by the Baha'i World Centers are towards the end of the chapter and appear as follows in their chronological order. The fruit of this injunction is that, referring to that general injunction, at the time of the manifestation of him whom God shall make manifest, everyone should be well trained in the teachings of the Bayán, so that none of the followers may outwardly cling to the Bayán and thus forfeit their allegiance unto him. If anyone does so, the verdict of disbeliever in God shall be passed upon him. I swear by the holy essence of God, the Bab continues, we're all in the Bayán to unite in helping him whom God shall make manifest in the days of his revelation. Not a single soul, nay, not a created thing would remain on earth that would not gain admittance into paradise. Wow, look at that. So if everyone, all in the Bayán, so in some ways, the division, the schism that occurred within the Baha'i, within the Bábí community in 1866, officially, the most great separation, which is dated around March 10th, 1866, by Shoghi Effendi, where the Azali, the followers of Azal, and followers of Bahá'u'lláh were officially separated through Baha'u'llah's own will. That led to this creation of this shortcoming that the Bab says that if all were united and those who broke the covenant, his covenant, which were the Azalis, the followers of Azal, who were deceived by Mirza Yahya Subh Azal and Sayyid Muhammad Isfahani, whom Baha'u'llah has denounced as the Antichrist of the Baha'i revelation. This weakened the resolve of the community, and as such, the potential to bring about more people into the fold of the faith was reduced. So here the Bab says, he swears by it. He says, I swear by the holy essence of God. We're all in the Bayán to unite in helping him whom God shall make man. All of his followers. Obviously, all of them didn't. Majority did, but not all of them. Make manifest in the days of his revelation. Not a single soul, nay, not a created thing would remain on earth that would not gain admittance into his paradise. Take good heed of yourselves. Then he warns, for the sum total of the religion of God is but to help him rather than to observe in the time of his appearance such deeds as are prescribed in the Bayán. He says all these things are subordinate to you recognizing him. And yet the Azalis have maintained, oh, well, this is the law, this is the thing, we're still waiting, all of this kind of thing. So that's contrary to exactly what the Bab had explicitly prescribed in the Bayán. And he says that here, for the sum total of the religion of God is but to help him rather than to observe in the time of his appearance such deeds as are prescribed in the Bayán. Should anyone, however, ere he manifest himself, transgress the ordinances, were it to be to the extent of a grain of barley, he would have transgressed his command. Then he continues, seek ye refuge in God from whatsoever might lead you astray from the source of his revelation, and hold fast unto his cord, for whoso holdeth fast unto his allegiance, he hath attained and will attain salvation in all worlds, in all the worlds. Such, and then the Bab quotes from the Quran, such is the bounty of God, to whom he will, he giveth it, and God is the Lord of grace abounding. This, I believe, is the last passage of chapter 5. Moving on to chapter 6 and 7. Both chapters 6 and 7 deal with a similar theme, which is beyond this course's summaries discussion. Unfortunately, no parts of these two chapters have been translated by the Baha'i World Center, nor any parts of them have been discussed or quoted by Dr. Saidi in his book. Chapter 6 consists of about 50 handwritten lines, so it's a rather sizable chapter in the original language, and chapter 7 is comprised of only 14 handwritten lines, so it's one of the shorter ones. Okay, we're going to take a break. So this would be the end of part 1 of book 5. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back and finish the remaining chapters of book 5.